Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, Cultural Humility, what it is and why it's important for you and your library, with our presenter, Suvi Manor. My name is Ann Abadi. I'm the host for the show today, and Brian Easterling is with us to provide some technical assistance. I'll tell you in a minute how you could reach either of us. I want to walk you through the GoToWebinar menu so you understand where you are and what we're doing. First of all, look at the handouts menu, handouts subsection. There are 5 handouts in there. The one is a PDF of the slides for today. And then there are 4 other Word documents that Suvi has provided for you. Some are related to activities that you'll be doing. So just go to those files and click on the file. It'll allow you to download it for your use. And then if you would please look at the questions menu. We use the questions menu for several purposes. First of all, if you have any technical issues, then you want to reach Brian and ask him about it. Maybe your sound is breaking up or something like that. You can put that into the questions box, and Brian will be monitoring that and will respond to your question. And then if you have questions related to the content of the program, you can put those in there. I will be watching those, and I will either interrupt Suvi if it's important for the slide she is currently on, or I'll hold them for the end and ask her questions later on. So feel free to put them in at any time, though, and we will get back to you for that. And then we also use the questions box as sort of a virtual chat. If you'd like to say what's working in your library or what isn't, and how you are making cultural humility important in your library, you can put those into the questions box as well, and we will share those out for everyone to see. And I will probably say something about them as we go through. So multi-purpose in the questions box today. I know there are a couple spots where Suvi wants some interactivity with you, and so we'll also use the questions box for that. That's our virtual chat, as I said. So everything else looks good on my end. So I am going to do a more formal introduction. Then I'll ask Suvi to say more about herself because I don't have a full bio here anywhere. And I don't think I do. Let me see if I can get my one here. 1 second. Yeah, we'll ask her to just say more about herself once we get started.
Did you want me to start?
No, I'm going to start for you.
Sorry.
Hello, and welcome to PCI Webinars. Today's webinar, Cultural Humility, what it is and why it's important for you and your library, with our presenter, Suvi Manor. Suvi is coming to us from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and I'll ask her now to say a little bit more about herself and then get started. Suvi?
Hello, everyone. I don't see who is attending, so if you know me, then ignore what I'm saying, but I have been around Florida libraries for a decade and very familiar with a lot of the organizations and libraries there. It was definitely a big part of my life, and I do love Florida libraries. If you want to know more about me or have questions about this presentation, because this is kind of a different topic and you want to contact me, you may. I'll give my email address at the end. It's basically just my name. I use my middle name now, Katrina, so it's with the middle initial, SuviKManor@gmail. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So if you want to reach out and you don't know me, feel free to do so. So as I said, today's topic is more of like an introduction. Normally workshops that I have attended, whether they are for personal or professional improvement or for a technical skill, have some information that we can easily apply immediately. This one, though, requires ongoing work and involves some vocabulary that's often misunderstood. So it's a lot of information to digest. Those of you who learn like me, I have included a notes sheet. I like taking notes when I'm listening to a presentation. So you can download that note sheet, and there are blanks in there that you can kind of focus on and listen to as we go along that you can fill out. If you lose track, and I am going too fast because it is a lot of material to cover, there is a key for that note sheet. The other two, the self-reflection activity 1 and 2, those are pretty much homework. We will talk about the activity 1 if you want to look at that. So, what is cultural humility and why is it so multifaceted? Okay, why am I not working? Ah, there we go. All right. So, cultural humility is a process of self-reflection and discovery in order to build honest and trustworthy relationships. This is different because we really need to get back to a beginner's mindset in order to have this attitude of openness and eagerness and a lack of preconceptions when studying the subject. I've found a lot of preconceptions discussing this and related vocabulary that I will present to you with people, and that's why I'm asking you to get back to this beginner's mindset, which actually comes from Zen Buddhism. And psychology professors like Alison Gopnik suggest that we all should get back to a child's mindsets since they deal with so much new information. Adult mind is, in her words, actually designed to exploit, whereas a child is tuned into learning. So I have a misty picture of the hills, kind of this mind exploration that we are going to go on. The goal of the self-reflection is to examine the cultures of others in order to have the beginning of an understanding for the actions, needs, and aspirations of others. The National Institute of Health defines cultural humility as a lifelong process of self-reflection and self-critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but one starts with an examination of her or his own beliefs and cultural identities. I do have a reference list that is not attached, which I can provide to you if you need. This is quoted in another article, which talks about critical consciousness and how this is different. It's more than self-awareness. We have to work at understanding our assumptions, biases, and values. This is not something you can learn in one short class, as it is a commitment and active engagement in a lifelong process that individuals enter into on an ongoing basis. The key here is that one must start with self-reflection. So we as individuals have to look at our own background and social environment and how those have shaped our experiences. We're all very aware of the changes in our communities with increased diversity of ethnicities, culture groups, and thought. This is happening all around the world, not just in our communities. We thus need to create an understanding of self and a desire for other-oriented service, which will enhance our personal and professional relationships by, of course, increasing our knowledge, improved communication, and increasing our understanding. But what I have found in the workplace to be the most important thing and helpful when you understand somebody else a little bit more, you avoid misunderstandings. The next, I'm going to show you some photos as an example of why this is important for our libraries. I used to work at the Palm Springs Public Library in Southeast Florida in Palm Beach County. This community changed very much since the beginning of the library. And This is from the ribbon cutting ceremony for the Dr. Ben Carson Reading Room at Palm Springs Elementary School. The couple of the library staff, we attended, as well as the dignitaries of the city. So here we have our mayor on the right, our vice mayor in the middle, and we have our school member representative, Chuck Shaw, who was really great supporter of schools and libraries and our city. However, I was really delighted when he retired and 2 Hispanic women ran for his spot on the school board. But if you look at this picture with the different people who are in the ribbon cutting ceremony, you can see that the only different person is actually Dr. Ben Carson's wife, Cindy Carson. And the leadership thus looks like this, and the student body looks like this. They are from a variety of cultural backgrounds. Palm Springs is probably 80 to 90% Hispanic, but it is not reflected necessarily in the leadership. So why is this topic important to us? The goals of librarianship we can find in ALA core values that they talk about service, access, inclusion, education, social responsibility, just to name a few of them. But I want to have everyone look at, are the goals really being carried out? When I was doing research for this project, and I am not a super awesome reference librarian like my husband is just brilliant, and some of you out there are very good reference people, I was not able to find anything on other-oriented librarianship. There was very limited surveys that I found that were dividing people or the information by ethnic group or diversity. And there I found some articles that talked about multicultural education not being a requirement for a library degree and library public service. Yes, we have seen lots of progress, especially in services. It doesn't mean that we don't need to take a closer look to identify any barriers that might still exist for excluded groups who are not using the library. So, and then if we look at our career, of course, we know it's dominated by white females. We can look at the ALA statistics. Even if we're educated visibly, I did not reflect the student body at Palm Springs Elementary, even though culturally I was immersed in Hispanic culture from different countries through my involvement in different organizations. This is Palm Springs Public Library Summer Reading Program group. I have my PLA III STEAM grant recipient. If you're not familiar with Public Library Association's Inclusive Internship Initiative, it's a wonderful program. I highly recommend it. She provided us with STEAM classes during the summer, and you can see some of our kids there. The whitest person in the group happens to be my son, and he is tricultural and half Hispanic. All right. So no one has or is a random sampling of all cultural life experiences. And this is why we need to take a hard look at ourselves. So what I would like to hear, if any, with this activity that I'm going to present, if you can share in just a little bit. I am going to say a caveat for all the workshop participants. I do expect professionalism. I have shared in the sample form the second self-reflection activity personal information of mine, and the information that's presented today by any of you participants let's just understand that this is for us, for our personal growth, not to talk about other people and spread other people's information, because this is very personal. Also, I wanted to say that when you are diving into this project and you come across something disturbing and something bothersome, something traumatic maybe has happened in your life that is affecting you in your life and in your relationships, I really recommend that you seek professional help. I have been a teacher for the past year, and we really emphasized on mental health because of everything that everybody has been going through. And so please take care of yourself. If in the process you doing this, you feel uncomfortable with something that you discover in your past or something that you haven't really dealt with, do that first. That's the most important thing. So because our experiences are different, there's implicit bias. Evidence of discrimination and unfair treatment exists at every sector. I discussed when I applied to be a presenter for this topic, I discussed this topic with my old professor, Dr. Diaz, who I studied multicultural education with. And he was telling me about a study with the housing authority where everything else with these two couples who went to different places to find a place to rent, everything was same with their statistics except their color. So at the end, they found out that there was only a few people who gave the same exact information to both couples. And in most cases, the African-American couple received different information. So there is documented proof that this still exists in different sectors and across professions and industries. Your life experiences color your views on everything. And then on top of it, we have this irony of perception. I don't treat my customers or patrons differently. And then once you open yourself up to objective research, you might find something different. Dr. Diaz shared with me about two teachers who were taking his class and decided, one of the teachers said, I don't treat my boys and girls in my classroom differently. Dr. Diaz challenged her, are you willing to put that to a test? And she said, yes, absolutely. And she had another teacher who was taking the class observe her. And lo and behold, she found out that she was spending 80% more time answering questions from the boys. And then, of course, she was able to address this once she realized that her perception of how she was treating people was different from actual reality based on objective research. So our first activity is to list the 10 closest people to us who are not related to you in any way. So if you have been making this list, while you're making this list right now, I'm just going to share a couple of photos. The first one is kind of humorous because I was thinking about, well, I'm Finnish. I'm culturally from Finland. I speak Finnish. So this is my background. So probably my list is going to look like this. Well, lo and behold, I don't even know these people. I met them at a concert. So the only thing I actually know about them is, one, I heard them speaking Finnish, which is why I went over and talked to them. And two, they like the same band, Sabaton, because we were all at the concert. But I really don't know much about them. Now, people that I would drop anything for look quite different. And don't get me wrong, I do have Finnish people on my list. But I do have different kinds of people from all over the world with different backgrounds. One of them traces their heritage all the way to the Mayflower from her father's side. One of them has Native American, Hispanic, Southern, all kinds of cultures mixed in. So now let's look at your list. If anybody, now I don't see the questions, so, or can I see it?
I'm watching for you, Suvi.
Okay. All right. So if anybody would be brave enough to share, let us know. If not, I will keep going and you can continue this as a homework assignment. It's just normally this topic would be more of interaction with the attendees. Oops. So what we're going to be looking at is who are the people? What is their ethnic or cultural makeup? Are they similar to you, including their views? Evaluate your list. Analyze it and see if this reflects information about your life experiences. Did you notice any subconscious bias? And finally, as I said, you can continue this activity at home. And one of the things that I did want to mention is during your lifetime, you may have different kinds of lists. If you are interacting in different arenas, different countries, different places during different times in your life, for example, when I was 16, I lived in a very small town in Finland with my grandfather, and my closest group of people were youth group members from the local Lutheran church. So we had very similar backgrounds. Now, years later, I went to University of Tampere in Finland when I kind of felt like an oddball, and I actually connected with the international students. And so it was the international students who I spent my time with, and they were from literally all over the world. The other thing that we have, I was talking about these preconceptions, things that prevent us from learning. Sometimes we have ideas on what people look like or are when we mention another culture. Sometimes when I say that I'm from Finland or I talk about Finnish cultural heritage, people imagine people looking like this. Now, none of my friends in Finland or in South Florida who are Finnish actually wear national costume as often as I do, except for the person who was my partner when I was folk dancing. Obviously, during that time when I was serving on a couple of local Finnish community boards, I interacted with a lot of Finnish people, but they did span different generations, different political groups, and because they had immigrated to this country at different times, their culture was different. The people who had been here for 50 years and the snowbirds who only spend winters in Florida are quite different. And here's a picture 34 years later of my friends when I was 16. We had a reunion and we definitely had pretty much very similar backgrounds. I was actually the most different one because I wasn't even a Lutheran when I was attending the youth group with them back when I was 16. Then we have another homework activity. This one is to create a summary review of your life experiences. You're gonna there is an attached form that I told you about that I have filled out. But as I said, please be respectful. There is personal information there. It is only to get you to start thinking about how certain life experiences might have affected how you look at certain things. And then you can look at, see if there is implicit bias that you may not have noticed before. So now to the personal action plan. The first thing we are going to start with is awareness. And awareness is very interesting. When I started my degree in multicultural education, I never thought about how people who were growing up didn't see dolls or postcards or posters or Santas or anything that looked like them if they were from a different ethnic background. And so awareness can come through studying. It can come through observation. But the thing that I'm going to encourage you to do is to really get into it and start creating relationships with people who are different from you. Another thing that I learned about was this subconscious bias, or implicit bias that you don't even realize that you're doing. I caught myself always complimenting little girls' appearance. And all the studies that I did personally and papers that I wrote about how women are treated in all these cosmopolitan magazines, etc., I now make a conscious effort of saying at least 1 to 3 things that has to do with a little girl's intelligence or artistic ability or cleverness or something like that. And if I really have to, then I will tell them how cute their little pink shoes are. The other thing that can help us is multicultural education. I could definitely give you several semesters of information on this topic, but since I don't have more time, you need to understand that most people do not understand what it means and they don't have a definition for it. Just to kind of help you quickly, a quote from the book Multicultural Education by Dr. Diaz says, "A multicultural curriculum, appropriately conceived and presented, does not attempt to force any conclusions on students." So it's not a certain viewpoint. It's about learning about other cultures, groups, or ideologies, and learning the difference between external versus internal culture. The external culture is a lot easier to see, and I'm going to give you some pictures as examples. Because people have different definitions for what multicultural education means, you need to be kind of ready to address challenges or objections to it in a very gentle and intelligent way. And finally, very important part of this personal action plan is to have a conscious effort to reach out of your comfort zone, as this is a continuous journey of self-reflection in order to understand others and create honest and meaningful relationship. And if we're talking about library staff, we're talking about customer library staff or library staff with another staff member. You can have an objective evaluation or a tabulation with customer interactions, just like the teachers did, and then review those results. There are different tools that can be utilized to change your actions once you are aware of an implicit bias. And this is why I feel like I need to do a part 2 of this webinar. All right, so as I said, external culture, really easy to see. This is from my cultural tapestry series at Palm Springs Public Library. Our Nepalese community hosted a Deepawali, or Festival of Lights, program. We can see their costumes, we can hear songs, we can hear and see different things. That's part of the external culture. Now, we did not censor the group, and we allowed them to talk about their gods, their religious ceremonies and beliefs and rituals, which kind of gave a little bit more look at the inner culture. Now, this other program, you definitely can't really see anything cultural about it, but it was the first of the series of which I created the Cultural Tapestry series. and it was called Music and Multicolored Memories. Now, we learned about internal culture through the eyes of Dr. Kitty Oliver, who is an FAU professor and also a talented jazz singer. She would sing songs and then talk about her experiences growing up in the South. Palm Beach Post used the title Race and Music Takes Center Stage at Palm Springs Library Show, even though I didn't really want to necessarily emphasize on that, but it was an important part of looking at the internal culture of her growing up. Sometimes you can learn about both external and internal culture by attending an event. Through this picture, we can see a Finnish Christmas party at a Finnish cultural hall. And we learn about the external culture that the Finnish children actually get to see Santa and receive the presents from him. And they wear a little bit different kind of elf hat. They don't wear Santa hats. Only Santa wears a Santa hat in Finland. But if you came early to this event, you might have observed that people came half an hour before the start of the event. They very carefully selected their seats. They sit down, very formally greet each other with a handshake, and appear standoffish. So you can get a glimpse into the internal culture of the people by observing them. My family had an experience with a Russian Orthodox church in Eastern Finland. First, the external, we can see the beautiful ornate decorations on the church building, which is not unique to our normal Lutheran churches in Finland. And inside, we saw there were no pews. And then observing this confirmation, it was my friend's son's confirmation, we were able to get a little glimpse into the internal culture of the Orthodox people. So you have to be observant, and got a couple more pictures because, you know, picture says 1,000 words, right? I have a picture that you can't really tell anything about. But once again, if you did observe the situation, you might be able to catch cultural nuances. In Finland, we have this thing about personal space. So here you have my sister sitting close to my father. That's only happening because they have a very close relationship. Otherwise, everybody has a pretty big bubble around them. And sometimes we find ourselves when we are interacting, especially in Southeast Florida, where we have all kinds of cultures, people from Latin American countries, for example, they start talking and they come into my bubble, and I find myself taking a step back. I have now learned to hold myself because I know that it might seem rude to them because they don't realize that they are inside my Finnish bubble of space. But one thing that can easily unite people is food. And visually, we can see the external culture. There are 2 cakes on the table. One is actually salty and one is sweet, but neither is one I have ever tasted in the United States. So we can learn by observing. Now, the additional important thing is significance of multicultural education. You need to know the history. Actually, libraries started with a very different purpose than what we are today. Libraries were supposed to assimilate people, make everybody the same, whether they were moving from rural areas to industrial work or they were immigrants from other countries. However, the shift came when a youth culture was developed during the 60s. There was this cultural diversification, evolving of an independent youth culture with its own music, fashion codes of conduct, and behavior. So it was this own youth culture. It doesn't matter what color or what ethnic background you had something in common through the clothing and through the music. And it is this that led to the idea that no teacher or no librarian should tell people how to live their lives, including what they should read, listen to, or watch. Some, of course, as we know very well, saw the immigrant cultures and their own culture as a nuisance and like baggage. And we are now learning of all the benefits that have come through this integration. The different values, attitudes, and practices immigrants possess actually add to our cultural capital by extending our cultural awareness and helping develop new tastes, understandings, and appreciations that enrich our lifestyle. And I did read some articles about businesses, how people who only hired from a certain school realized that they couldn't just hire all these, I forget if it was a Harvard or Yale graduates, but they needed to have diversity because all those people approach the problems the same way. With diversity, you have this differentiation of thought and creativity and things that can come about that is much more than you would with people who are very similar to each other with similar life experiences. So the role of library is to promote self-realization by being a cultural animator and by giving people access to diversity of expressions, not to make judgments and selections. So thus the librarian changes from a guide in helping people finding the right way in the world of knowledge and culture, selecting the good from the bad, into a navigator, helping people find whatever they might ask for in a world of information and cultural expressions where everything is of equal value, no matter what you personally think about it. So this is where we need to check ourselves. We might think something is wrong or something is right, but we have to understand that with this view comes there is no correct ideology that is on a pedestal above others in true multiculturalism. Now moving on to the organizational analysis, very similar. However, critique is going to be a little bit more tender subject because as a previous Florida Library Director, I very well know the challenges that we have in promoting the purpose and mission of libraries to decision makers and stakeholders who do not work in libraries and understand the important work, the invaluable work that we do. However, in order to do this, you have to be able to receive criticism in order to grow as a person and an organization. If you have fears about what the answers of a culturally and ethnically diverse needs assessment would find, you're not ready to begin this process. Only if you're willing to do the painful work of opening yourself and your organization to critique will you be able to start addressing those issues that truly matter for people who are different than you, or in the organization's case, different from the people who founded the organization years ago. Because a lot of organizations, like the school system, I could not believe the challenges that Dr. Diaz had with Palm Beach County School District, which is supposed to be such a great school district and so diverse. But he had these challenges with the school district in being able to address the issues that truly matter and be able to change an organization that has not changed with the times. Usually, we measure success and excellence by utilizing the statistics that will reflect positively on the organization. And that's very understandable. As I mentioned, we do this because we are trying to present the information, we're trying to get funding. And if your organization is truly in jeopardy of losing their funding, please don't do a public survey that will make your library look bad, because obviously the survival of the library is first, and then we can work on carefully and slowly different things. And if you have any questions, I am happy to discuss this topic with you and how to approach it, because we talked a lot about in our Florida directors meetings, we talked a lot about this issue of funding. But if you have your own taxing district and a more secure funding base, you need to understand that the statistics are going to come out and they're going to be public. The customer satisfaction surveys and data collection methods have to be created to measure them by the groups that are the truly most underserved or unsatisfied. And then we need to look at what are we doing right, what are we doing wrong? And as I said, be prepared that the data will become public. The administrator organizational self-reflection, this is very similar to the personal plan. It's a continuous journey of self-reflection in order to understand others and create these honest and meaningful relationships. But this time we're looking at employer-employee. There are a lot of people in libraries who are introverts, and that's why they kind of got into libraries, because they like that quiet aspect of the libraries. But you need to develop personally, if you are a leader, that somehow you create relationships with your employees. You don't have to go out for drinks after work with them if you don't feel comfortable, but there has to be some kind of contact where the employee does not feel so removed from the leadership. One of the groups of people that are usually always, it's very difficult because people don't have the educational background to serve, are special needs or differently abled, not just customers, but also staff. And some differently abled staff don't even know that they are on the autistic or the Asperger's spectrum, but I have witnessed in my past discrimination because of these differently abled people and their interactions. And because somebody is not understanding why they're behaving a certain way, because they don't understand that they are possibly looking at these things from a very different point of view because they are differently abled. And by learning and developing yourself, you can become a better leader and better manager, and being able to help your employees who are all different. Get out of your personal comfort zone in order to grow. Know your current statistics of your organization, the staff makeup, race, gender, age. And then when you know that, then you can work on things to try to create an organization that is more reflective of the community. Create an anonymous staff satisfaction survey in addition to the customer satisfaction survey that includes race, gender, age, and additional identifying factors. The metrics have to include measures of equitable service for diverse groups and issues. And the results have to be tabulated by race, ethnicity, or cultural group. Or otherwise, you can't use this data to support professional development for staff and other improvements in services and helping address the marginalized groups. We have to understand that an employee from a previously marginalized ethnic group is not automatically a culturally sensitive employee. So professional development is always needed. And those of you who are watching this presentation later and you are listening, there is a spelling error. The word ethnic, the N is missing. Have employees among themselves do an objective evaluation or tabulation with customer interactions and review the results, as I just discussed. And I said there are different tools that can be used to change the actions once you are aware of an implicit bias. But this has to be employee-driven, not manager-driven. Administrators can do this amongst themselves, but it has to be somebody like with equal power, because you don't want to be exposed. There's going to be fear, there's going to be issues if this is your evaluating supervisor who is doing the observation. It's not going to get the results that you want. And once again, we need to understand that this commitment to cultural humility in the organization is a continuous process. The easiest thing for us to do is to stay in our isolated corner and talk to only people who think like us and agree with us. But we need to be intentional. We need to be intentional in seeking out relationships with people who are different than you. We have to be okay with getting uncomfortable by listening to people with different viewpoints than you. We have to learn about the internal culture. And this doesn't happen by reading a book. The awareness part, reading a book, might help you with awareness or taking a workshop when the author points out these inequalities that you hadn't noticed before. But until you become intentional in creating relationships with people of all cultures and creeds, you can't even begin to understand why they have a certain point of view or why they do certain things. So and I forgot to put my timer on, but it looks like I'm doing okay. So I am encouraging you to be open-minded and be accepting. Yes, even loving. You want to create a world or a work environment that's not only rich and fulfilling, but also one where peace and understanding goes a long way. And it sounds a little bit corny, but when you really think about it, it's not. And I'm just gonna leave you with a quote from Coretta Scott King: "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." And I don't know if I can type my email address here, but we definitely are available now for questions. Looks like I'm doing perfect time, so we should have about 10 minutes for any questions.
Okay, Suvi, Brian already put your email address into the chat for everyone. So.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Are there any questions at this time? Comments? I do have one thing, Suvi, that occurred to me when reviewing this. For the last probably 30 years, I've been in environments where there's no possibility of mixing with other cultures. You know, the only people I interact with are white librarians, white female library people, primarily. And there's no way to get other people into my sphere. What do you suggest for something like that?
Well, I mean, now with the pandemic, we learned how to use technology even more. I think that the technology could be an avenue for maybe some kind of discussion groups, or even participating in library virtual programs. I know that a lot of libraries are still developing some of the technology for that, where the patrons can actually provide content to a program. Normally, it's usually you have a presenter, or you you have a presentation by a group that's in person, obviously there's not necessarily interaction if it's just video recorded over to, even if it's a live Facebook feed or something like that. But I believe that there are people, I have not looked into that. There are people who work on the technology in order to have interaction with patrons, different patrons who are watching, and then they can be part of the program or the lecture or the workshop, whatever it is. Let's see. I see
A couple questions. I'll read them for you. I was
Okay.
married to a Nepalese man for 15 years and attended many Nepalese cultural events, ate the food, and even more traditional Nepalese clothing. Many happy memories.
Okay.
And then I was on a webinar that said we do not have to be neutral when we see things that need to be called out, but what we do need to do is push back from those who just don't see their biases.
Is that
What do we need to do? I think is what she's saying.
I don't see that. Oh, wait.
No, you won't see it. Let me read it again. I was on a webinar. I was on a webinar that said we do not have to be neutral when we see things that need to be called out, but what do we need to do about pushback from those who just don't see their biases?
I really don't see it as productive personally. I'm actually a political science major, and the reason why I don't pursue that career is because I don't see any benefit from people calling each other out, calling each other names, the negativity. I don't see anybody changing their minds because of that. I think the much more better way to approach things is with a positive example, with inclusion, with, hey, how you doing? If you have a relationship with someone, they're much easier going to listen to you, or at least you can share with them what your thoughts are if you have a relationship. If you don't have a relationship with them, why would they care what you think anyway? I mean, that's my opinion and what I have seen in life.
Okay. I was wondering if you could share a bit more about your cultural event series that you started at your library.
Okay, yes, I actually I am kind of a child product of the Palm Beach County Library System. That's where I grew in my library career, and I was part of the multicultural team or committee in Palm Beach County Library System, and I was part of a lot of Hispanic Heritage Month programs, and even participated in some of the Haitian Heritage Month programs. Because I'm personally international, I'm always drawn to everything that's multicultural, international. So I had this desire to expose people, different people, to different cultures. And I guess that's kind of what is still an answer to the previous question as well. Just having exposure to different people and different cultures, and recognizing them as valuable members of the community, valuable human beings. Those are kind of like the first steps into this wonderful, idealistic world where we have more acceptance and more understanding towards each other. But these kinds of programs do provide an opportunity for different people to learn about different programs. And I didn't just include different countries. Obviously, you know, we had the Nepalese school actually met at our library. So they were a very easy contact to have. Since I'm from Finland, I hosted a Finnish program. And we also, it was Read Together Florida, was a Swedish author. So we did Swedish or Nordic Christmas event for people. So we tried to tie in whatever cultural things that we could But it wasn't just limited to that. We had Renaissance Festival. We had obviously this program that I started with, which was jazz, and also this deep look into the experiences of a person living through in the South as a African American woman growing up. And I'm trying to think what other programs, but basically what I wanted to include in this culture was everything. Everybody has a culture. So when obviously we had Hispanic heritage programs because we had a very large Hispanic community. And so I did get a little bit pushback, and a person came up to me and said, why don't we have Irish Heritage Month? And I immediately said, wow, that's a wonderful idea. Do you know anyone who I could ask to be a presenter? And that stopped them there, because if you allow everyone to have their say and to be a part of the library community, it's going to be less pushback. Because if no one is censored, then everybody has the opportunity to share who they are. Any other questions or clarification about the Cultural Tapestry series? Or anything else?
Was it a monthly event? And how long did the program run for?
It was like the special programs. It wasn't always, it depended on when I was able to schedule something, because they were all pretty much like a special program. We did do things, a lot of things with we had actually a Spanish book discussion group that met our library, and one of the people had a lot of contacts. So there were a lot. We had a lot more than just Hispanic Heritage Month. We had Mother's Day. We had Father's Day. The Father's Day wasn't in Spanish, but the Mother's Day I know was in Spanish. And we had like a special Christmas. There were different, poetry. We had a poetry event. So it depended on when the presenters were available and when I was able to logistically schedule them. So it was more like a special event.
Just like with all, yeah.
Maybe like 4 times a year, 5 times a year, depending on which groups and programs I was able to put together.
All right, good. Any other questions for Suvi at this time?
Looks like we have 3 minutes left. I'm trying to think of something that I glossed over because I was rushing. Definitely, there's a couple words that there's a lot of misunderstanding, like the word assimilation, the word acculturation, and multicultural educate. There's a lot of, I've noticed in my interactions with people throughout the years, that there's a lot of different definitions to these words. And I think because same thing with cultural humility, we really need to try to figure out how we can have the same vocabulary with the people that we're talking with, because people are going to have a different definition for a word. And you might assume, I have this problem, I always assume everybody basically has my background and they know what these words mean. But when you get into a deeper conversation, you realize that there are misconceptions about them. So I think being a good reference librarian, actually, in this case, is like the best, because reference librarians are taught to just keep asking questions to try to get to the meat of the matter. And if we keep asking questions, we will find out how that person defines something and what they mean. So using those skills can be very useful.
You're getting a lot of thanks, and people say they enjoyed the webinar.
Oh,
any other questions?
I'm so glad. I'm happy to do more.
All right.
You're welcome.
Well, Suvi, great work. Nice webinar. Thank you for putting it on for us. And thank you all for
It was
attending.
my pleasure. It was really a great, it was a lot of work, I have to admit, because I didn't even research as much as I wanted, but this topic is really close to my heart, and I'm probably going to be researching more on it. So I'm happy to help anyone who wants to reach out.
Great. All right. Thanks everyone for attending, and thank you, Suvi, for putting it together and all your research. We hope to see you again soon at another PCI webinar. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you so much.